Hello and welcome. My name is Lori Painter, a holistic health practitioner and life transformation coach for women. I am sharing with you in this little series not all of, but many of the tools and resources that I have implemented in my life that has transformed my life for the better. So if you are into personal empowerment, freedom, love, inspiration, and empowerment, then maybe you might want to look at this series and see if any of these tools and resources are that they light you up, if they spark a little bit of curiosity in you. These are just some of the things that I've implemented over the course of the 20-something years that I have worked in the health industry. So today I'm actually talking about how to process negative emotions. That learning how to do that self-inquiry is what this one is about. So I have a few resources, but the intent is to be able to process negative emotions such as shame, guilt, apathy, grief, anger, disappointment, frustration, sadness, hurt, fears, insecurities, and wounds, and to transform that into insight and personal responsibility and intentions and wishes and solutions and love, appreciation and compassion. And that is so powerful. They say that most people do not emotionally mature past the age of 8. And even further so, where we are emotionally traumatized is where our emotional maturity gets stunted and stays and runs on a track. Even though we intellectually grow, we physically and biologically age, but emotions, it's kind of funny, we don't really seem, at least in the United States, and maybe I'm, who am I to say that I really know what's going on out there, but in my world, we're not celebrated for being emotionally intelligent and know how to process emotions. As a matter of fact, what I think I've seen in my own life experience is, how can I medicate it? How can I distract myself and shut it down? I don't know what to do with it. It's like it just runs on a loop, and all I have to do is just try to move on. And that couldn't be further from this tool that I want to share with you. And here are a few resources to help you process your emotions that you may find very powerful. My first and foremost one that I use all the time is Barbara DeAngelis. She created something called the Emotional Map. I actually found this and learned of this when I was like 14 or 15 years old. My parents had gone through a divorce, and my mom came home with this little kit called Making Love Work, and it had like a video cassette, and then it had like these cassette tapes, because back in the 90s, that's how personal development and programs in education were delivered. And one day when I was just home alone, I saw this sitting next to the VCR. So I was like, what the heck is this? I like this idea, Making Love Work. So I pull out the cassette and I put it in, and it's people. First it has like husbands and wives. One person going through this emotional map and processing it with somebody else, and then doing the same, vice versa. And then they did it with children and parents. And I started crying. Because I had never seen people take painful experiences and process it so fully, not only that they got the lesson, but it brought more intimacy and connection and transformation personally, and then with the people that it was affected. For me growing up, I saw my parents fighting, never really being able to process emotions fully and to come to a peaceful place. Fighting just kind of went into a cycle, and it never went anywhere. And I repeated that same pattern because I didn't know how to process negative emotions. I didn't know how to resolve conflicts. So that was one tool, doing the emotional map. And I love it because it will start with, say, like anger, blame, and resentment. And that is like, I call that like wounded masculine energy. And then you move down to like hurt, disappointment, and sadness, which I think is like wounded feminine energy. And then moving it down to wounded child energy, which is like my fears, my insecurities, and my wounds that I probably adopted somewhere under the age of 12, maybe 7. And then moving down even further. So it's like we got all these wounds, and then we move into now the rebuilding or the reparenting process, where it's like, okay, what are my regrets? What is the understanding, and what is the responsibility? And you process that fully and completely, which I think is like the reparenting process. And then we move into like what I call is healthy masculine, which is like, what are my intentions? What are my wishes? What are my solutions from this situation? And those are like the tools. That's the wisdom. That's the transformation, where it's like, wow, this is how I want it to be. And that's very conscious. And then I say this is now the wounded, the healthy feminine energy, which is where we transmute what started as, being triggered in fear, insecurities, and all that like negative energy. Now we've taken it all the way through this process, and now we can get back into love and appreciation, forgiveness and compassion, because we see it for what it really was. And we got the lesson, and we realize that, wow, these fears, insecurities, and wounds just keep running on a loop. And these triggers that keep happening in the outside world are really our soul calling to us to let us know, like, hey, this hasn't been cleaned up. And that's why you've got all these triggers, that you could actually live a life without everything triggering you. Because I know for me, it was like, man, everything is getting to me, and it's because I didn't know how to process. I didn't know that I could take every negative experience that I had ever had in my life, that if I actually sat with it all and moved through this map, that I could be empowered, that I could have a shift in perspective, that these were all leading me to transform my perspectives and my behaviors and my emotions. So the emotional map is one of the tools that I personally love. I use it in my practice, and it's hugely impactful. Another tool that in healing emotional and processing emotions fully and completely is the work by Byron Katie. Her work is so phenomenal, and it's based on basically our projections of what we're seeing in other people, and our life experiences are, again, kind of wounds within ourselves that we're not seeing clearly. And so she does this process that she calls the work to unravel those projections and to see things from a different way. And that is so powerful, because sometimes we really think we know what's going on. We have a judgment, we have an opinion, and it's all based on what we've been exposed to and how we've been taught. When 1 + 1 = 2, when I see this, it means this, and that's what's going to happen. And it's as innocent as that. That doesn't mean it's how it really is, but that's based on our life experience, what we believe things to be. So her work is hugely impactful, where you really question your perceptions of other people and even yourself. And then you start to get in touch. Ooh, when I'm dysregulated, this is how I cope. When she asks you, how do you react when this happens? And you get to see like, oh, I shut down, I get cold, I get distant, I avoid, or I get critical, I get punitive, whatever it is that you do. That helps you see like, oh, these are my coping strategies. And then she says, who would you be without the thought? And you realize like, oh, I'd be relaxed, I'd be confident, I'd be at peace, I'd be at ease, I'd be in love, I'd be joy. And it's like, oh, that's actually who you truly are when you don't have these limiting cycles going into you, dysregulating you. So that is another tool. Other tools that I think I really like, Ho'oponopono. It's a very spiritual one. This is basically like really quick. There isn't a lot of inquiry with it. It's basically on the premise that what you see in the outside world, you see somebody being dangerous on the road, you forgive yourself for the times that you've been perhaps mindless and putting yourself and others in danger. You basically forgive within yourself what it is that you're observing in the outside world. Dr. Len Hugh is, I always get dyslexic with this, Hugh Len or Len Hugh. Anyhow, sometimes my mind, but his story about this was just so inspiring, because the one that I had learned, I believe this was from who was sharing this story? I can't remember who I heard this story from, but basically the story about this guy, Hawaiian, was working at I think it was a psychiatric ward, and the Hawaiian spiritual healing practice is these 4 things. I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, and I love you. That's all Ho'oponopono is. Those 4 things with what it is that you're observing. So Dr. Len Hugh goes into this place, and he does not treat any patients. He does not, work on it that way. He basically has their charts, and he forgives within himself what he is seeing around him. And apparently, like, I wasn't there, but this is the story, is that not only did everybody heal, right? They actually ended up, I think, closing the place. Like, they didn't, like, it all, like, healed. So that's a whole other spectrum. Like, listen, some of these earlier things, the emotional map, the work by Byron Katie, those are like nice, slow, digestible ways of processing emotions. And then the Ho'oponopono, hugely powerful, very simple, but can kind of blow your mind when you start to hear what that power actually really does. So I think there are a few other things, but I'm going to leave you with that. But learning how to process negative emotions of guilt, shame, apathy, grief, anger, disappointment, all of those things that I shared earlier, and to transmute them to get the lesson that helps you see things differently and behave differently, and to where you're grateful for the things that happen, to where you can be in love and appreciation and pure forgiveness, and anything just left with, again, you're just left with love and gratitude and appreciation. That is so powerful, like so liberating. And I really do wish that everybody had that ability to process difficult emotions to where it can actually empower them and transform their lives instead of run their lives in a cycle, because I've been there. Negative emotions have run my life most of my life. This has not been my whole life that I've had all these tools available to me. But once I implement them and I make them a daily practice, like, wow, how liberated I feel, how lit up I feel. And I want that for you. If that's what you want, this may be something that you want to go further and deeper in and research and implement for yourself. That's all I have for you today. I will be sharing with you in future videos the tools and the resources that I have implemented that has transformed my life to where it's one of empowerment and to live a life that I dreamed of, to become the person I wanted to be, instead of a victim of my environment and my life circumstances. So hope you enjoy this and stick with me, and see you in the next video. Bye.